I'm Rebecca Rosenblat-Billings. I'm a registered psychotherapist as well as a clinical sexologist, and I do everything from trauma work to women's work and just empowerment stuff. But I do a lot of trauma, and a lot of it is related to sexual pieces. So any kind of thing from sexual assault to trafficked women who've gone through a lot, to people who've been abused as kids, and any kind of experiences they've had. That's just a part of it, of course. The rest is also how to make your sexuality great, how to reclaim your sexual self, how to, be the goddess you were meant to be. I'm deep into my menopause journey, like really deep into it. Started a long time ago, and it's been a good process for the most part. My perimenopause started very, very subtly. In fact, I wasn't even aware. All of a sudden, everything felt heightened. My sensations, except for sight, I wish it was heightened. My sense of hearing, sense of taste, sense of touch, sense of smell, everything became heightened. And then psychologically too, I noticed people have always referred to me as the eye of the storm. No matter what's going on, the eye of the storm is still and calm. But I found things were sort of getting to me a bit more, and I was becoming somewhat more reactive than responsive. I don't want to imply that, I became like really irritable and snippy or anything like that, but I was becoming more sensitive. That's what I noticed. And I didn't put two and two together until I spoke with other women who were noticing some similar things. So I thought there might be something there. Similar conversations where none of them really realized that there was a change. They said, I've noticed, and it usually came up in a psychological concept that I've been really irritable lately, or easier to cry. And in no way do I want to imply that women become weaker or irritable or anything like that, but just the sensitivity seemed to have gone up a bit. But this was with perimenopause. With menopause, it was a whole different story. And only as we explored a little bit more and I kind of knew where to go with it, did we realize that it was a possibility that they were heading into perimenopause or were right in the thick of it. Just when I started to notice similar conversations, and they're very specifically in a particular age group, so I thought we might be on to something. And then we dug a little bit deeper, and we started to notice that there were other changes as well that indicated that maybe this was tied into perimenopause. The thing with it is it's a lot sneakier than menopause. Menopause and puberty, very clear-cut markers. You get your period, you stop your period. But perimenopause is sort of like men's andropause, where you just don't notice it until the symptoms start to intensify, and one day you go, oh, what's this all about? I think it was just kind of getting used to having to ground myself more, do my breath work, regulate my emotions better, be more patient. That's something that I was never born with and never acquired. So even in my calm, my patience isn't my strongest virtue. But just learning that something is going on here. So this may be more about me than the other person. Because at the end of the day, what happens to us is not as significant as how we respond to what happens, except for, of course, cases of trauma, etc., when bad things can happen and we have traumatic responses. I spoke with my family doctor. She is absolutely the most amazing person. She's very open. She's open to holistic stuff. She's really, really great. And I ended up going on hormone replacement therapy, which was just a godsend, a lifesaver. I know that there was a study in 2002 that said that it causes breast cancer and all these risks, and everyone just went off it. Even physicians, they said, oh, whenever women hit 65, they said you have to go off. So when that started to happen and pharmacists started to do the warning, a lot of women decided not to take that route. In fact, that was so highly inaccurate. A lot of stuff has come out since, but a lot of people haven't bothered to listen to it. So it's just the first scary story, and a lot of women are just in case kind of thing. But my family physician, she was really great. She went over everything. So I started that like as soon I hit menopause very, very early because I had a hysterectomy, and I was able to start not that long afterwards. My menopause story is just one day, all of a sudden, I have to have this hysterectomy. So I had this like a cantaloupe-sized tumor, and I kept ignoring it. I kept saying, oh, it's fibroids, blah, 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 even though if one of my clients told me that, I would make them go and see their doctor right away. So I just kind of neglected it. And eventually, it sort of had to come out. And so when I had the hysterectomy, it was an eye-opener. It didn't have to be as drastic as it ended up being. I didn't have to be cut open in the way I ended up being, like a lot of people do it laparoscopically, etc. But it was because I had neglected myself. I'd put everyone else first. I just basically neglected my own health. And so that was an eye-opener. And after that, I realized that, had I taken better care of myself, maybe I wouldn't have had to go through such a drastic surgery and so early. But also, my personal experience allowed me to see firsthand what a woman goes through emotionally, physiologically, psychologically, in all those ways, because you don't find it in books, what a person goes through, the nuances, the little idiosyncrasies, whatever. So in learning that, it was really, really great for me. It gave me insight information, and I also felt quite empowered because now I wasn't talking about something that I had read or not read, because there's not that much literature out there, but I had inside information. So it was like being part of this group, being honored into this group, and being able to speak to other women about it. Pretty much, like it sort of slipped into a little bit. It wasn't like overnight, but they came pretty quickly, and hot flashes was the hardest one. And it's so funny, you get them at night. If I got them during the day, I'd be so happy because I'm perpetually cold and I have the seat heater on in July, so it would have been really great. At night, I like it cooler so I can fall asleep, but most of mine happen at night. You just want to peel your skin off. But I learned to sleep with a fan and a little remote in my hand, and autopilot, great for muscle memory, on and off, because when you come out of the hot flash, you can sometimes feel chills. I definitely did. Prior to my own journey, I had heard of menopause as a very negative thing. It's sort of like your best before date is gone, you've sort of expired, and it's just downhill from here. You're not going to feel as sexy, you're not going to enjoy sex as much, and you'll be invisible and you'll be passed over. And it's not that at all. It's not that way at all. So that was a really pleasant experience to learn that that's not how it is. But it was because I was open to learning about it, more so for other women's sake, not even necessarily for myself. I was open to learning what other women are experiencing, and I benefited at least as much from it. Biggest perk? No periods. No periods. None of that thing, I had a friend, she says, I'm either premenstrual, menstrual, or post-menstrual. Not everybody feels that way, but not having a chunk of my time taken away because I'm in discomfort. I'm sitting there with a heating pad or just, kind of feeling icky. And if anything, when I was premenstrual, I put so much pressure on myself to not express any mood, because then people will say she's PMSing. And now I don't have to worry about it. I had read an acronym, for bitch, babe in total control of herself, and I embraced my inner bitch when I became menopausal. I have to admit, at first, it was really tough. It required some adjustment. I have an interesting story. I do a lot of workshops, and one of them is teaching women to feel good in their skin. It doesn't matter what body, what age, it doesn't matter. We're all beautiful in our own way, and we have worth, and that's not what should be deciding it. So I did that lecture, and I enjoyed it. It was one of my favorite lectures. And post-hysterectomy, I'm about to leave, and I break down crying, and I say, I can't do this. And my family's like, why not? You've done it 100 times. I said, because I'll feel like an imposter, because I feel all my girly parts are gone. So I don't feel like I'm really a woman anymore, even though these are internal parts, but I said, oh, my girly parts are gone, so I don't feel like a woman. And my son, he was so young, and he said to me, he said, Mom, I think he was like, I don't know, 10, 12 years old. He says, Mom, you tell every woman that she's beautiful in her own way. So it doesn't matter, internal or external, it doesn't matter. Go there, feel beautiful, and you sit with those women and you do what you've been called to do. And it was such a powerful statement from him, and it totally changed the way I looked at me. Isn't it something else when clinicians' kids, they hold you to what you've been saying? Kind of sucks, but this time it was really great. Both of my sons, I have to say, were extremely supportive. They were very sweet, and they knew that Mom had been through a big surgery and things were going to change. I also had another physical chronic GI issue, and they sort of learned to be very loving and supporting, and there are good days and there are bad days. So they were very, very loving, and I have to say I was very fortunate. I had that support. So it was great. And they reminded me that during perimenopause, early 40s, I was carded a couple of times when I had gone clubbing. So they said, hey, Mom, like, you shouldn't be worrying. And then through menopause, somebody actually asked me to be a Budweiser girl for a Super Bowl party. And of course I said no, but my kid said, but isn't it nice to have been asked? And you know what else? Naked News asked me to be a guest. And I said, yeah, it's okay. And it wasn't because I was older. It was because if I didn't do it in my 20s, I ain't doing it in my 40s. I always made sure that they were aware of what it's like to be with a woman. And you know what? My daughter-in-laws will say that they are the most amazing husbands. But it was because I wanted them to know what it's like to be a woman, the sensitivities and vulnerabilities that women go through. My older son, he was about 13. We used to, back in the day when you had CDs in the car, we used to each give our favorite songs to put on a CD when we took our road trips. Everyone's favorite music was on it. And my son had saved and saved and saved to get this particular disc from a particular artist. And I said, oh, you didn't give me any of the songs from this particular artist. And he says, well, I couldn't. They were misogynistic. And I said, oh, so what'd you do with the disc? I tossed it. I said, well, you could have given it to a friend. He says, well, it's not good enough for me. Why would I give it to a friend? And I just went, oh. He was only 13 at the time. Always respectful of women, so. Unfortunately, the next generation didn't give me the permission to talk about it. Said, you know what, I've had a hysterectomy, so there's going to be changes and stuff. Yeah, we know, we've been there, kind of thing. Nobody wanted to talk about it, but being able to talk with cousins, etc., or even people that are much younger than me, that was quite lovely. They were very open to it, and in fact grateful, because they were taught not to talk about it. You don't talk about sex. You don't talk about, bodily changes or bodies in general. So I think it's what they've been taught. Definitely to women, to men as well. You're conservative, but men can still get away with it. They say, oh, men, they're just being guys, and they'll make those off jokes. Not as much anymore, which is good, but they can get away with it. But women are not supposed to talk about it. And it's interesting. I'm South Asian, and I come from a country that came up with the Kama Sutra that has 1.4 billion people. So clearly they're fooling around. There's some sex happening over there. But it's so conservative. You don't talk about it. Bollywood movies, you're not allowed to kiss. So all this other stuff is going on. Monsoon rain, her clothes are all filmy and sticking to her, and there's all kinds of shaking and stuff going on. But when it comes to sex, no, don't show that. And you don't show kissing. It's just not done. So I think it's also the culture, because my relatives were all South Asian. So culturally, they don't talk about it. But the whole idea behind Bollywood was subtle seduction. So it is supposed to be seductive, but not direct and in-your-face seductive. So I think that may have impacted my relatives. Well, I think not being able to talk about it, first of all, we don't know what's happening with others. We're own little world. We think, am I broken? Is there something wrong? We're just not finding out that everyone's being impacted, and we can actually challenge it, impacted by media, etc. And we can actually challenge it. So there's that piece. But I think also because we've been taught to think a certain way about it, I think it has a huge impact because we start to believe it, because when we listen to the same thing over and over again, the brain doesn't distinguish between if it's actually happening in us or if it's something that we're hearing that's supposed to be happening in us. So it can sort of inadvertently become our reality. I remember one time a bunch of us girlfriends were going there, and the female who was the first one to get hot flashes, she talked around it. She wouldn't talk about it directly. She just said, there's something wrong with me. You know, my core temperature is so high. I want to peel off my skin. And she's going on. So I said, you're having hot flashes. And she was like, oh, like I'd let out this big, huge secret about her, as if it's a disease or something like that. And then we had a candid conversation. It was great. It was a great conversation. But some people do treat it as a disease and they're embarrassed to talk about it. They really are, because it's like, as if there's something wrong with them, and there isn't. And where there's secrecy, it's we're hiding something because it's not supposed to be okay. And I think that's what secrecy does. That's the biggest damage, is it makes it not okay to be menopausal or to even talk about it. Because South Asian women weren't allowed to really talk about it, it was just like, okay, that means, you know, sexuality doesn't exist. So I have a lot of people that say, you know what, I've given my partner children, I've given him grandchildren, I've been a great wife, and now my job is done. Even Mother Nature is saying my job is done. Because she can't have, you know, procreational sex. She's not supposed to have recreational. Procreational sex stops even a couple of decades prior to that. But my job is done. So that's it, I'm done. I'm going to kind of graduate into that place where I'm revered, I'm respected, I'm the wise woman, and I don't have to do this anymore. So a lot of them will use that opportunity to say, not going there anymore. But, you know, it's chicken or the egg. It's possible they weren't having that great of sex to begin with. So they're like, why bother? It depends. Like some of the traditional ones, they love that status, the queen bee. And now my daughters-in-law are going to pay the dues that I paid. I'm the queen bee now. I don't have to worry about my body looking a certain way. And they've generally amassed some wealth, or they're at least financially comfortable. So they're in a very different place. But they're not thinking of themselves as less than. Sexually, they're, you know, it's not even about that, but they're not thinking of themselves as less than, because it's a rite of passage almost, in a way. I'd taken a marketing course eons ago, and the first class they said, we make people feel bad about themselves so we can sell them the goods. And that was my last class, because that's how advertising works. And if we can quantify things, it's easier to say you don't fit in. So age, weight, all sorts of, you know, bodily changes that are just part of a healthy life. I know a lot of people that are in their 60s and 70s that are healthier than people in their 30s, who are really busy with families and careers and whatnot, but were made to feel bad. So I think that sort of really makes it difficult for women. So you notice the changes you're going through, and media is telling you that there's, you know, you're not good enough anymore, that you're invisible, even though that's not true at all, but that's what women are told. And a lot of times what happens is, if they're in a heterosexual relationship and their male partner stops approaching them sexually, they personalize it. They say, okay, my partner is noticing my changes and no longer attracted to me. Maybe they're attracted to younger women. Whereas that isn't it at all. In couples work, I find out that usually the guy has his own changes. And for a guy, it's not just about showing up, it's about being able to perform. So a lot of them are going through, you know, erectile dysfunction, performance anxiety. And so they're really afraid to approach their partner and fall short. So it's about their insecurity. But because they haven't had that conversation, women will personalize it. Generally, most women won't bring it up on their own. They'll talk about the issues they're having, but they won't bring it up on their own. Even their physicians won't bring it up. There was some statistics, different statistics that were showing that 65% of physicians, even as they talk about other below the belt issues, won't discuss intimacy with men or women. It's sort of tabooed. So a lot of people won't bring it up. And when they start talking about the issues they're having, anything from vaginal atrophy, etc., then we start talking about it. Once it opens up, they're so grateful because there's remedies for just about everything. There really are good remedies. For instance, there is some vaginal atrophy that can be easily addressed, but a lot of women, they say, I'd love to have sex with my partner, but it's become uncomfortable and I really miss it. And once they find out that these are just bodily changes, like if you're holding your menu up here, hey, my eyes did that too, that means there's other changes that are going on too. And there's nothing wrong with it because there's an upside to it as well. And then when they find out that this is perfectly normal, they're not broken, there's nothing wrong with them, it's par for the course, and they get it treated, they're like, oh man, that was really good. I think, first of all, each woman is unique and we have to respect that and hold space for that. Also, I've seen a lot of benefits. So if I have a woman who says, oh no, I'm entering menopause, I go, so what are you going to miss? Your periods? No, I'm not going to miss that. So don't worry about it. And so it's just the way, it's just kind of flipping it around and looking at the positives. There are a lot of positives with it. One cute one is because those maternal hormones are starting to plummet, women get this second wind and it is so exciting, and they'll have they'll start a new career or they'll have a new lover or they'll make changes because they've laid their landmarks to rest. So the universe is saying, boo-hoo, it's your turn now, go and do what you want to do. It just opens them up. And also sexually, women are having some fabulous, fabulous sex in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. Truth be told, the couple that I'm most jealous of, they're in their 80s, and they have an amazing sex life. And most younger couples will say, we're the best of friends, but sex is not happening. They're like, we can't stand each other, but my gosh, sex is so good. And they really, they bring it. It's happening, and it becomes more and more important the older we are. So the intimacy aspect, people have taught me so much about it. My second win was I'd been asked to do stuff in broadcasting, and I was like, oh, I never got trained. Again, it was just for the knowledge because, as people say, I can take like a pussy puppet and a dildo and do it like a cooking show. So at first I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not sure I can do this. I'm not trained to go in front of the camera. But then I said, who cares? And I just went and I had so much fun with it. And also, if I wanted to dress in my red thigh-high boots, I did it. I didn't care what anybody thought. They were just sitting in the closet. They needed to come out. And you know what? It was great because it was fun. It was confidence. Gave me some second looks. Maybe some people just laughing at me, but I didn't care. At least I wasn't invisible. I love doing workshops with women, sexuality workshops with women. And what's interesting is in those workshops, I see a lot more older women than I do younger ones. So the 20 somethings, they're sitting very properly, they're afraid to say anything. And the older women are, yeah, I already know about that. Well, tell me about this. And it's really refreshing to see that. We will make, basically our vulva out of Play-Doh, different colors Play-Doh. And a lot of women will say, well, I don't know what it looks like. I'll say, well, go into the restroom, take a look at it, and they'll come back and they'll create it, and then they'll name it, and then they'll have a dialogue about what it has to say. And a lot of women have never, given a voice to their vulva and, talked about what they would like, or maybe they had a tough experience. And I think it's a product of the time we live in right now, because oddly enough, if you go back a few centuries, women's sexuality was really, really celebrated, because women could, especially sexually speaking, they could start a war, they could have people do some pretty drastic things. So it was considered to be a power, female power. And the symbol, as we know it now to be a heart, was in fact a symbol for vulva. The heart looks like a fist with a bunch of tubes sticking out, but if you look at a vulva, it looks like a heart. And so that was the symbol that was assigned to it when we were allowed to feel like goddesses, and they were desired in a beautiful way, revered, celebrated. And then when patriarchy took over, that was just giving too much power. So it changed it to heart and romance, and it's impacted women. Sometimes, women just, they're single, they want to experience healthy sexuality, they want to have fun, and they feel that romance has to be attached to it, because otherwise they'll be seen differently. It doesn't really, like, why is it different for men and women? And what I've noticed is a lot of women, when they get that second wind, they're tired of their relationships. Some of them will at that point have affairs, take on a lover. And the interesting thing there is they feel that they have to justify it by saying, oh, but we have strong feelings for each other, even when that's not kind of what's sustaining it. And oddly enough, they'll be faithful to their partner, their fair partner, by not having sex with their own spouse, because they're trying to say, no, 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 this is love, this is where I get taken care of, this is where I have the love and the romance. And it could very well be true. I'm not denying that it isn't true, but there are cases where no, that's not the case, but they have to justify it lest they be seen as slutty. I hate that word. Well, the low libido, in some cases, it can be very legitimate because estrogen is plummeting. So that's why when people go on hormone replacement therapy, particularly just estrogen, because it doesn't have the harmful side effects. If anything, it has a lot of benefits. With the synthetic progesterone, it's a whole different thing. But anyhow, so some people, they are on hormones and their libido is doing just fine. Others, I've seen a split. For some, it's just because they're no longer feeling sexy, so they have a hard time having sex because they're not feeling sexy. But here's the interesting thing with women: the more sex they have, the more they crave it. The lesser they have, the lesser they want it, till it gets to a take it or leave it, rather leave it place. But once women get back in the game, the more sex they have, the more they want it, because their sex hormones start to rise, testosterone starts to go up, dopamine, everything starts to go up, and the desire goes up. A lot of women at that point, they're terrified of doing anything with their partner. So I say, hey, get a fabulous little toy, have some fun on your own or your fingers, whatever it is that gets you going. Read erotica, whatever it is that gets you going. Get yourself back in the game. And once you are, you can invite your partner if you want or not, but you can be in the game. There's no reason you can't be. The most common thing that I hear is this particular toy. Women will say, how has this not been a part of my life until now? Why hasn't anyone told me about this? And this is true even of women in their 20s and 30s. They're saying, how did I not know about this? It's just totally transformed my life. A lot of women will say that, oh, I shouldn't be wearing that, and I shouldn't be, oh, that's too young for me, etc. And I say, well, if you've always enjoyed short skirts and you feel comfortable, go for it. Like, don't just do it. If you don't feel comfortable wearing it and you're going to be self-conscious, then yeah, that's okay for you to pass on it. But don't do it just because someone told you that outfit is too young. If anything, if we put on red lipstick after 40, people don't judge us as much. So, like, own it. It's owning it. It's doing it because it feels good for you. Well, one thing I really wanted to do was I wanted to challenge the cultural mores and all those things, particularly in the South Asian community, because I have quite a few clients from that community. So I sort of, as I was transitioning, I saw the significance. I mean, I was learning what we need to put out there, and I was very forthright in my own story to give people so they'd give themselves the permission to talk about that. So I really wanted to change the way that cohort of people looks at things. And it was a growing process for myself too, major growth through that. But honestly, other than a few physical challenges, I think I'm a better person for it. Before, I was somewhat insecure. I don't want to say I was super insecure because I always believed in myself and in girl power. But I was definitely a more insecure individual where I cared what people thought. But once I hit menopause, I could be my authentic self. I said, people are going to talk anyways, so I might as well have fun with what I want to have fun with. I'm not going to stop them from talking. When you're younger, you're a certain way, and you can maybe control people's narrative and dialogue, but they're going to talk about me anyway, so I might as well go and have some fun. I celebrate my accomplishments. I celebrate the fact that, I'm at a stage in life where I can look at things differently. Wisdom is more important, experience is more important. But for me, the most exciting thing is being able to show up for other women who have gone through similar journeys, like no one showed up for me. I think we give ourselves permission to finally do what we want. We give ourselves permission to be who we are. Gail Sheehy has written a beautiful book. She calls it The Sexually Seasoned Woman, and I love it. And she's talking about women that are older, that are in fact menopausal, that are reclaiming their sexuality. I've also written about sexual awakening. So I think the idea is to not let all that mental static get in the way. So I tell women that when you hit that pause button, don't let it be like a dead end. Let it just be maybe a pause button where you can say, okay, what's this all about? Whose voice am I hearing? Is this media? Is this something that maybe my mother told me or a friend told me? Whose voice am I hearing here? And if it's something that I've heard and not something that's coming from within, then I'm not going to listen to it. Give yourself the permission to be free. It's really, really freeing. It's the ultimate freedom to give yourself, that chance to do whatever you want.